Hello and welcome to episode number 65 of Future Chat from Unwind Media. Every week on this show, we aim to discuss all of the week's most interesting science and tech news. So let's get started. This week, the show is brought to you, instead of being brought to you by audible.com, I've decided that this show is going to sponsor itself. And so if you're a listener of the show, maybe an infrequent listener, but you are not yet subscribed, the ad this week is asking you to please subscribe because we'd love to have you coming back each and every week. We love taking time out of our week to look up and learn about the science and tech news that's going on. And I don't know, Mike, do you feel the same way I do, that I get a lot out of the show, and I feel like other people, would they listen on a regular basis, would also get a lot out of the show?
I completely agree. I
Yeah.
really enjoy reading science and tech news and being able to talk about it with you guys and share it with everyone else. For me, my hope is that it encourages others to do the same and be interested the same way we are.
Yeah. So that's what I'll do. If you head to unwindmedia.com/futurechat, you can find buttons to subscribe to our RSS feed or subscribe in iTunes or Stitcher Radio. And I hope you enjoy the show. Nick will not be with us today, unfortunately, but he should be back in time for next week's show. And I almost think this weekend conspired against us to be able to actually make a reasonable show. We're getting right into the middle of July, and August tends to be a time when news sort of dries up a little bit. We're past things like WWDC, Google I/O. There's not a ton of news, but we did manage to find a number of stories that are pretty interesting. And the timing of this week, it was crazy. Like, it was my birthday this past weekend. I had my bachelor party, which you, Mike, so generously helped plan. And that didn't in any way change the show, but this weekend there was a lot going on, and it seemed like there wasn't going to be a lot of news, but I think you'll find we pulled it out. So what I wanted to start with was something that we've talked about as we're sort of into the summer, what I call beta season. And this is where guys like me, who tend to be a little bit riskier with their technology when it comes to using it on a day-to-day basis, will install betas from Microsoft and betas from Apple. And there was a while there, if you'll recall, a few weeks ago, where I was running 3 different kinds of beta software. I'm now down to, on a regular basis, I'm now down to just one. I do have a build of Windows 10 running on my second hard drive, but I only really use it to see what Windows 10 is like and to prepare myself for the update on July 29th, I guess it is. But I don't know if if you've read these articles that say, don't install a beta software on your daily driver device. You've read those too?
Yeah, for me, I guess that's more of a common understanding versus an opinion, but maybe you can enlighten myself as well as our listeners as to what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I mean, it's fine. Really, honestly, I get it for the mass market, because because it's almost always developers who say that, or people who have developed in the past. And what they're referring to when they say, don't do this, don't install it on a device you use every day and need, they don't want to have to deal with someone giving them a bad review for their app, or saying, oh, the software is broken, fix it, when it's because you're using software that isn't officially supported. And so I've never left a bad review for beta software. And I know that when I run the risk of something going wrong and my phone having to restore back to stock software at any given moment. That's why I use programs like Google Photos for my photos. So that basically, if my phone just literally exploded right now on the desk next to me, yes, I'd be out of phone, but I wouldn't have lost any of the data that I have. Like, in the last 2 weeks, I've discussed, or the last, I guess, several weeks, I've discussed stories about how I had to get my phone replaced and I had to get the screen replaced. So I had to wipe my phone a number of times, and it didn't really impact me. And I also had the issue with Mac OS 10.11 where the audio drivers weren't quite working with Audition. So I was trying to record a podcast and was just basically completely unable to, even though I tried to test it and it was seemed like it was working, but then just absolutely flat out didn't work. And so my Mac is now back on stock software, but that again means I had to uninstall everything. One of the benefits actually of doing that is that your computers, your mobile devices, your laptops, your computers tend to get crusted up with all kinds of stuff that I don't even know really where it comes from. Caches get full and backups get made and all this kind of stuff. So I was basically on my Mac. I was basically week to week having to do like flush out files that I didn't need, or move them to my external hard drive because my 120 gig hard drive was just basically full all the time. And so I reinstalled Mac OS 10.10 and then reinstalled all my programs, which I have quite a number of big programs. The Adobe software is huge, but I still ended up having like 80 gigabytes free. And I don't know how that 80 gigabytes got filled. It's a mystery to me, but it's nice having all that space back. So every once in a while, it's okay to do a sort of spring cleaning, and this time is a convenient time of year for it.
Yeah. As far as speeding up your system, I'd like to see, maybe they've already done it, but some sort of blind testing on if it's a real effect or if it's more of a confirmation bias type thing where you do your cleaning, it's like, oh yeah, it's running so much faster. Like, even if it's maybe a momentary, like initial speed up, if it actually makes a difference, kind of over like a week time frame type thing.
Yeah.
Or just if people notice it at all. Say you like people are given either ones that have been reset or haven't been, and if just people notice on a more subjective basis, not necessarily quantitative, but more just, oh yeah, this feels fast. But
Right. Yeah, I think I noticed it more earlier, like around Windows XP, Windows Vista, when I could reinstall operating system and it would really, really feel faster. But now I don't really get that
yeah,
anymore.
Rob, you're old enough to have
Uh-oh.
grown up with being a kid and wanting to play your computer game, and your parents, I think in your case, your dad will say, "Don't go on the computer, it's defragging." I
Uh,
don't know. Did you ever experience that?
I did many times.
Yeah, I did as well, and I think I'd still usually load up Free Cell or something and play Free Cell for a bit while I was defragging, and
Yeah.
I guess that was kind of whatever. But from what I understand, since XP you didn't have to defrag because it just either automatically did it or just the file structure didn't require it.
It was less useful, I think. For XP, I think, at least in the early, when XP was first released, I think it was pretty important after a
Okay.
while, like at a certain point in your disk. It wasn't necessary to do it every week. Um, it always did seem to go, if you sort of maintained it, did a defrag every week, it felt a lot faster than if you did once a year and it took 6 hours or something. It was just completely messed up. But I think the cumulative time that doing it every week would take is that's a lot. That's a lot of time.
Yeah. As far as betas go, the only ones I'm on are some app betas, and so I'm on. Actually, I forgot to mention pre-show. I was mentioning which ones I'm on. I'm on the Chrome beta as well.
Yeah.
So the Chrome for Android beta, Facebook for Android beta, Meerkat I think is still on beta, and I got on Medium when it was still a beta, but that just recently got out of beta. It was only on beta for like 2 weeks or something like that.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
even know why they
That was
started out
fast.
with a beta. So
Yeah.
from what I can tell, the app is still fairly limited, but I guess it's stable enough to not be a beta anymore.
Right.
Now Chrome, I like that Chrome the beta itself, the tweaks aren't enough to be just super buggy all the time. It's
Right.
more just feature adding and A/B testing, I think.
Yeah, it's little things.
Whereas the Facebook beta is like the buggiest thing you've ever seen. And I've had the last couple times I've been really bad where at one point if I tapped into a notification, say someone commented on a post, and I tapped on it and tried to leave a comment from that tap through my notification menu, it would
Right.
crash every time I tried to post. So for about a week, I wasn't able to reply to any comments. And with Facebook, you can't run both the beta and the non-beta at the same time. You're either on the
Right.
beta or you're not.
Yeah.
So I couldn't even like roll back. I couldn't just use my other main stable one in the meantime while this one was buggy. It's like for a good solid like week, I couldn't use one pretty crucial feature. So
Right.
that's the kind of, I guess, the bad thing about betas, and it's kind of that aspect of, well, don't use it on something that you rely on.
Yeah.
In the case of a Facebook app, who cares? Like, but if it's,
Yeah.
Windows, then if you need it to work properly for your business, then you want to have a stable version.
Yeah.
So I can understand where that's coming from.
Yeah, for sure. And I've noticed that I'm a lot less like old me when I was first getting Windows 8, when I was on the Windows 8 previews. I just went completely 100% all in and installed, for instance, I installed I just completely wiped out my Windows 7 installation with Windows 8 beta, and it didn't matter at all. Like I think I was even in school, but I was like, whatever. Like I can install Microsoft Office on any computer. I have the disk. I can install a web browser on any computer. Like that's not the kind of stuff that betas are dependent on. Whereas now I'm using a lot of more specific software that takes a while to download because it's several gigabytes. But also it depends a lot more on intrinsic system things that do change, and so you need updated drivers for those kinds of things. And so I'm a lot more cautious now. And so for instance, I'm on Windows 8.1, the regular version on my main hard drive, and then I have Windows 10 on my backup on my other hard drive.
Yeah.
Just a slight difference of tactics.
Yeah. I'd like to be able to dual boot a phone, to
Yeah,
have like a mod or like rooted version of an OS and a stable version. That'd be kind of fun.
that would be cool.
But
The nice thing is the with the bootloader, I guess you'd call it, on Windows, you basically just go hit restart like you normally would, but while holding down Shift, and
hmm
it pops up with a contextual menu that says you want to switch into a different operating system. You select that, and then it'll give you the option of either 8.1 or 10.
yeah.
And yeah,
Is that through the BIOS then that does it, or is it a separate
I think it's
thing?
no, I think it's a bootloader on the actual as part of the actual operating system.
Oh, okay, that's cool. That's
The the only bad thing about it is that you can't. This is a problem just like for me. This is not even a first world problem. This is like a tech nerd problem. Is that while when I'm doing TeamViewer, that window is not accessible to TeamViewer. Like it's
right.
gone through the shutdown process enough that there's no networking, and so the only way I can go to that screen is if I am actually sitting physically at the computer. So it's annoying. I can't remotely switch between the two desktops at will. I can go because I've set Windows 10 to the default as the default. If I just restart normally, it will boot up in Windows 10, but I can't get back to Windows 8.1 without
hmm
actually physically being at the computer.
Right.
That's one downside of being a huge nerd and using a remote viewer, remote desktop all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that being said, one of the other things that was kind of a letdown for me in the last week, Apple Music was released in iOS 8.4, and I guess the latest Mac, which was Windows or OS 10.10.4. And I do not have iOS 8.4 on my phone. I have iOS 9 beta, and so I was able to listen to Beats Radio, Beats
Yeah.
One, but I was not able to have access to the Apple Music. That's supposed to be coming tomorrow in a new beta. They do it every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. But so I had to spend a week listening to just the radio stations, which actually worked out pretty well because on Canada Day, we ended up listening to my phone through. It was called, I think, Canadian Classics was the station, so it was just looping through Canadian songs, and everyone really seemed to like it. And then on my birthday on Friday, my birthday party on Friday, I just listened to it. Like we listened to just charting hits, and in both cases, I basically just hit play and left it for hours.
Hmm.
And the nice thing about later betas, like basically every beta after the first one on iOS, the first one is always terrible on battery. Like it's absolutely horrible. But after that, it gets pretty much back up to where it was. And so I was able to use my phone not plugged in all Canada Day. It was basically playing music via Bluetooth the entire day,
Hmm,
and the battery was just fine.
nice.
Yeah.
So, just for context, Beats One is radio and Apple Music is streaming,
So yeah, Beats One is radio. There are a number of sort of stations as well where they'll play. It's not live radio or anything. You can
like a
skip songs.
playlist, though. Yeah.
Yeah, but it'll sort of skip around on the subset of songs, the playlist that they have. And then, I mean, that's part of Apple Music, but Apple Music as a whole, this part that you subscribe to with the 3 month
Right.
trial is very similar, if not identical, to Spotify, where you
Right.
have a list of all the songs, so it's like 30 million tracks or something that iTunes has, and you can just play any of them in any sort of, you can make any playlist you want. You can actually apparently share playlists, although I haven't actually
Hmm.
tried that. I've seen the share button, but I haven't tried it. Um, and so I'm really looking forward to trying that on my phone when it comes out tomorrow. I found myself listening to a lot more music than I have, and that's just some sentiment I've seen expressed across the internet. That people are like, it sounds so stupid. Like basically, my last 7 days of podcasts since this came out, podcasts I listen to on a regular basis, have been old people and millennials rediscovering radio in 2015. But I honestly think that, like, as I'm echoing the sentiments that they've said, it honestly does feel different than just radio, because radio is pretty local, and I know there are internet radio stations, but the idea of basically 300 million Apple devices all have the ability to just basically hit play on Beats One, and they're listening to the same DJ, whereas there's no other radio station that has that kind of immediate reach. And so I think it is a very interesting idea, and the fact that you can go back and, for instance, if you have a 1 hour show that you always want to listen to, you can go back to, they have Apple Music actually as a Tumblr of all things, um, where you can find the playlists of songs that were played in that given hour or in that show. And so you don't have to miss any of the music that that DJ or that person
Hmm.
would be playing. So I think it's a cool play, and giving it away for 3 months means that a lot of people are going to sign up. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Spotify, what they can do to keep up, and what the other services will do to compete with this.
Yeah. Well, and that's the whole thing is that obviously this isn't new. Apple didn't
Yeah,
invent radio, and they didn't invent streaming music. But like you said, it's the reach and the, I guess you could call it, cool factor of it's Apple doing it. So it's just reaching that wider audience and that level of acceptance, I guess.
yeah, but it's interesting nevertheless, and I'm going to keep listening. And as of tomorrow, I'll be on the actual Apple Music service on my phone, and so I'll be able to report back how that goes. I'm assuming they've said that it's going to be like, they said an upcoming update will provide that functionality. So everyone's been assuming it's going to be the next beta. It could be a later beta, but I don't see them doing that. So ideally, it'll be tomorrow.
Nice.
All right. So enough beta talk. We got some good news after last week, our moment of silence for Falcon 9. We were reading around, and the space station was never really in danger of running out of supplies. Their planning team did very well, and despite three different modules exploding on the way to deliver payloads to the International Space Station, they still had plenty of food. They had plenty of supplies. There was no issue of them running out of anything like that. But a Russian vehicle, a Russian unmanned, what would you call it? Like a,
Drone, a space drone.
I'm sure that's the best. That's the best word. I guess you call it a rocket. Um, Delivered stuff, water, food, that kind of thing, to the International Space Station. It successfully made it to orbit, and everything was normal
Oh,
as it should be.
thanks,
Um,
Putin.
yeah, for once, I'm sure he had a lot to do with it. Uh, one of the cool things, there's a guy, as I was reading about all of this space stuff, there's a guy who is spending a year in space straight. Scott Kelly, I believe is his name. And I started thinking about that idea, being asked to spend a year in space. We know that the human body does not do great in space. I don't know if you followed Chris Hadfield when he came back, but he detailed in a lot of detail all the physical impacts that space had on his body and his sort of conditioning, basically, to get back to
Hmm.
uh, Earth gravity strength. And I think he was only there for about 6 months, maybe even less than 6 months. And this is a whole year, so they're basically doing endurance tests on
Hmm.
this astronaut. So yeah, it's really great that they were able to keep enough supplies up there that all the astronauts were fine, but now they're really fine, and space is back to what it should be, as this rocket made it just fine,
Hmm.
like you would expect.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see these new endeavors and living or just extended time in space because I guess in the future you are going to be looking at recolonization. I think that's a very real goal is to establish some sort of colonization colony, I guess, either on the moon or Mars or somewhere that's
Yeah,
not Earth, and to see how viable that is, I guess. And obviously, the first hurdle is to make humans able to last in space. So,
yeah. But so it'll be very interesting to see, and hopefully, I don't know if you paid any attention to the press stuff in the wake of the Falcon 9 explosion, but SpaceX is going to be taking a few months off of launches in order to assess what went wrong, because they still don't really know. There was We talked about in the after show last week about how they said it was an oxygen tank or something overpressurizing,
yeah.
but it's still not clear how that happened or why it happened. And so they're going to take, I think, the summer off and at least 3 months and figure out, do a full investigation, a full inquiry into what happened, rewatch frame by frame of the video to see if they can spot anything. And but it's by all means, it's of course not over. NASA has been very upfront in saying, listen, this is still our best option. We're still putting all our weight behind SpaceX, all our funding. So this is by all means going to continue. It's just a matter of learning from the mistakes that were made. Well, first of all, figuring out if there were any mistakes that were made, figuring out if this is actually a preventable thing, which by all accounts it should be, or if it was a freak accident. But space is by no means over. We have the International Space Station. We're not giving up on it. We're going to keep trying to send stuff up there, and eventually we'll get new shuttles in the next few years, and we'll keep trucking away at space.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know a lot of people were trumpeting the space is hard
Yeah,
motto, but I think what you have to keep in mind is that yeah, it's hard, but you also that doesn't give an excuse to just fail all the time without looking into it, right?
right.
Like you still have to figure out what happened, and you know, failure shouldn't be an option, so to
Exactly.
speak, in the words of Apollo 13. Um, but you know, you gotta expect success, and you gotta prepare for success,
Yeah.
regardless whether it's hard or not. So
Yeah.
it's good to see them keeping at it.
Yeah. Speaking of space being hard, our next story is also space related. Uh, we talked in, I think, the last week about the New Horizons probe, which is currently, as we speak, apparently about a week, 8 days or so away from its flyby of Pluto. And we're getting better and better images every day of Pluto, until out of nowhere, about 2 or 3 days ago, I think it was, July 5th, I guess that was a Saturday. Uh, Apparently, the probe went into safe mode. So that's the mode where it stops communication and basically reboots itself to try to figure out, like, do diagnostic tests to figure out what happened that caused it to do that in the first place. Um, so obviously, if you're one of the New Horizons team members watching this probe, you're just like, wait, no, what? We're so close. This thing was traveling for years. I think it's nine
Yeah.
years.
It's
and
like
10
when you're
days
watching
later.
a hockey game and it's like in overtime
Yeah.
and they're on the power play and it goes to the point and then the feed is cut and it's like, what?
Yeah.
No.
We're gonna miss it.
Yeah.
So that was terrifying, and I was watching that on Sunday, thinking, oh man, like, is this going to be like Philae, the one that's on the comet, and are we gonna basically not know if we're going to hear from this thing when we want this data from it? But fortunately, the probe came back online. It wasn't. I think it was less than a day that it was off. Maybe only even a few hours. And the diagnostic test that it ran while it was in safe mode determined that there was no fault with software or hardware that occurred. It was just sort of a random computer glitch, which I guess is good because like it's basically a blue screen of death, and that
Yeah.
happens to every type of computer system, whether it's a Mac with a kernel panic or whether it's. Although that being said, I have not on Windows 8 or Windows 10 ever seen blue screen of death, and not just because they changed it. I think it's now just a big sad face emoticon instead of like just text. But I haven't seen anything like that. So I think our software is getting better. But obviously this probe was launched like 9 years ago, so it would have been using much more basic software.
Right.
But they were saying there was a timing flaw in a command sequence in preparation for this flyby, and that made me think: was this a leap second issue? Like, but apparently, it was not. It was just they were doing some sort of command sequence to do some maneuver, some turn, or unfurling some sort of thing, and they're not doing that for the remainder of the mission. So, if this is a specific problem with that, then it won't happen again, anyways.
Yeah.
But yeah, a little terrifying. That being said, you wanted to talk a little bit about the leap second.
I did. It was. I'm more interested to talk about the science part of it.
Yeah, me too.
Um, the tech side, it's people treat it kind of like a Y2K type thing, but it's not like that at all because this one people have actually known about for a long time and prepared for it, and it
Well,
should be written into code
we
everywhere.
chose it.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
it's been integrated in. It's a standard. There's no reason why anything should be thrown off by the leap second.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting. I think was it a CGP Grey video that he did leap second on, or maybe it was a Minute Physics one.
Tom Scott. You watch Tom Scott?
No, I
know
might.
that
Yeah.
I'll
Anyway,
put a link to Tom Scott's video in the notes
Okay.
because explaining how the leap second works computer-wise.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them in there. But basically, like everyone's familiar with a leap year, or
Yeah.
the day that accommodates the making up of that day that's not included in the normal year cycle.
Right.
But a leap second is along similar lines, and I just thought it was interesting that technically even the leap second doesn't account for all the time that gets lost in your normal counting of time, because I think I can't remember what the number is, but something like every 1,000 years or however many years, another second can get made up or something like that. But the leap second keeps us current within like 1,500 years or something before you lose like another full second or something like that.
Yeah.
So the whole idea is like, well, why don't you just save up all the leap seconds and do like a leap half hour or something like that? But the whole thing is like, well, a leap second's a lot easier to kind of program in, and it doesn't throw people off as much.
Right. So what they do is every year, they look at the difference between the Earth's orbit, because that's the problem. The thing that causes the issue is Earth's orbit is not stable. So the year, as defined by one rotation around the Earth, isn't always exactly 1 year, like we count it with our atomic clocks.
Yeah.
And so if there's ever a discrepancy of, I think it's more than 0.9 seconds in a year, then they either they fix the second to make it fit in that year. And so in general, it's very stable, but they do have to do that. Like the way they've set it up, they do have to do that from time to time. And that's why we keep getting these leap seconds.
Yeah, but a leap second is a regularly scheduled thing. the same way a leap year is.
I don't think a leap second is regularly scheduled.
Okay. The video I watched made it seem like it was, but I remember they also mentioned something about that there's a potential to take away a second if they needed to, but they haven't had to. But
Right.
yeah.
There's a potential to. Insertion of leap seconds. Yeah, it's not regular. There was one in. They either do it on June 30th or December 31st, or both. And so in 2005, the last four were 2005, 2008, 2012, and 2015.
Oh, okay.
In the 80s, there were like 6 or 7 leap
Okay.
seconds.
So it is an as required thing then.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for that real time update there.
I'm not sure what that video is, but it's very, very unprofessional.
Maybe I just didn't pay attention enough during it. But it basically it gave the illustration of, oh, they did a leap year and then a leap second, which was close enough for their purposes, but they could have went further and made an additional adjustment to make it even more accurate.
Yeah.
But it's the kind of thing where you'd have to be around for like 2,000 years before the sun was off by like 10 minutes or something at kind of thing. So it's like no one's gonna care.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw, I think I tweeted or retweeted this. Oh, I did. Yeah, I can see it here. There was talk, and I'll in the Tom Scott video that I'll link to. Tom Scott is a really cool guy. He's one of those guys, sort of like CGP Grey, except you can see his face. In that he explains things really well and he's really knowledgeable. But he's like CGP Grey in that if you start watching his videos, you are not going to stop for a while. Like I went through when I first discovered him and all the videos he's done, I just binge watched like 80 of them all in one day. But so there was this tweet from a group called DIN Research, and they measure, or I guess they're able to measure global routing instability, so traffic on the internet and how it gets around. And for the 5 minutes or so after the leap second, there was just a bunch, like instability spiked like 7 times normal, just because there's all these services trying to accommodate this second. I don't know if you heard or if you have heard, but apparently what Google does to handle the leap second, is they program in throughout the day, rather than doing it all in 1 second, throughout the day, they just sort of give like 1/100th of a second or 5/100ths of a second. Like they tick it away slowly so that there's never a whole second where it switches all at once. And apparently that makes it a lot easier to cope, because the important thing isn't that time is exactly right. The importance is that time is linear. And so if you have a whole second that just gets added, it can throw things out of alignment. Whereas if you're adding tiny fractions of a second every so often, everything stays linear, or at least it's able to stay a lot more linear than it would otherwise.
Interesting.
Different ways of handling it. The more I read about it, the more I really think it's awesome. Yeah. But we survived the leap second. I guess we should get t-shirts.
I survived the 2015 leap second.
Yeah. Was there anything else you wanted to say on leap second?
No, just that it was interesting, and a lot of people were. I know I celebrated the leap second.
Yeah.
Did you? Were confused by it.
Yeah. Facebook or was it Twitter that you posted? You were obviously sitting there waiting for the leap second to screenshot it.
Yeah, I was on the bus, and I went to, I think it was like thetime.org or something.
Right.
And they had the live countdown, and I screenshot it as it happened. It was exciting. It was very conveniently at 6 p.m. my time, so it's not like it was middle of the night for me. So yeah, no, it
made me laugh that picturing you sitting there like, all right, leap second, I got you. You made the second last forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the last sort of big piece of news that we had before we went into our new after show mini topic was just a short one about Windows 10. So we've talked in the past about Windows 10's coming. It's coming on July 29th. You're not going to be able to upgrade for free to a legitimate version of Windows 10. But if you don't have a legitimate version of Windows 10, you will be able to stay on the Windows Insider program, which means you'll get regular beta updates. But we heard this week that Windows 10, because they're doing it kind of differently than any other Windows upgrade, where basically Windows 10 is now going to be, there's not going to be a yearly big update to Windows. You're just going to get little updates throughout the year. And so rather than having basically slamming Windows or Microsoft servers on July 29th, as at one time, the way that they've historically done things, in the way that companies like Apple do app updates, and Android, I believe, does a similar thing, though they do a similar thing to Microsoft, which is it's going to be a staged rollout, but it's not even going to be staged based on device or based on anything like that. Basically, they said that on July 29th, probably the only people that are going to get prompted to update are going to be Windows insiders. And then people who have already reserved their upgrade will probably come soon after. If not the same day, then probably a day or two later. So I don't know. Do you have Windows computer that you use at all that you're going to be upgrading to Windows 10?
At work, but chances are it's not going to get upgraded anytime soon, just because of its enterprise and.
Yeah, we're still on Windows 7 on Enterprise.
Yeah, with us, the only reason that any of our companies, in basically directional drilling, upgraded to Windows 7 was because the main software that we use stopped working with XP.
Right.
So because of the move to Windows 7, so that's why everyone had to upgrade, was for the software.
There was a story on a totally different tangent relating to that. There was a story a couple weeks ago about how I believe it was the Navy, possibly the Army in the States, is paying Microsoft millions of dollars to keep supporting their installations of Windows XP because they were not ready to upgrade, and now they just aren't supported. It's just so terrible.
So now there's one guy working at Microsoft who still supports XP.
For the entire Army / Navy, whichever it was. Yeah.
That's
a little scary. But so that being said, if I know a couple people who are waiting for Windows 10 to try to get on board and not be pirating Windows software anymore, and it seems like the only way to do that, at least right now, the way they're talking, is to be on the Insider program, but that means you have to stay on the Insider program. So that's not ideal if you just kind of want a computer, but I guess if you're used to having the little thing in the bottom on your taskbar that says, this is not a genuine version of Windows, you should use the upgrade, you're going to be fine with every once in a while installing an update and getting beta software. That's the kind of thing you get for not paying for it, which it's just something you have to deal with. You have to deal with either getting the illegitimate thing or dealing with the update thing. I would still think I would prefer, if I wasn't going to pay for it, I would still prefer to have the upgraded operating system.
Are they still sticking with their Home Edition, Professional Edition, Enterprise, all the different levels?
It's a little bit simpler than that, but it's definitely, there's still going to be an Enterprise version. There's still going to be several different tiers. I think they're working, because it's free, because the upgrade's free, you're basically sticking with the kind of version that you have. I'm assuming the Enterprise upgrade will not be free, but it's something that the given enterprises will have to negotiate to upgrade, just because they come with a sort of higher standard of security and a higher standard of support. So we'll have to see how that works, but I assume the Enterprise Windows 10 upgrade is not going to come immediately, and it's something that you'll see later in the year or even possibly next year. I don't really know how the enterprise cycles work. I think they kind of announce, hey, this is up, but whether or not a new business can just go and get Windows 10 Enterprise on the first day is going to be something that we'll have to see. But I'm hoping that, considering that one of my hard drives is on the Insider program, the other hard drive, the current one I'm on right now, is signed up for I've reserved my copy of the upgrade. I'm hoping that around July 29th, I'll be able to get it and upgrade, and then kind of cross my fingers that that everything works. I would assume that, for instance, Adobe just updated all their programs for 2015. So I would assume that they've worked a little bit, at least with Microsoft, to make sure that things work okay.
Yeah.
Um, but also, that is going to be the week between my wedding and honeymoon. And so I think I might even be going away like that long weekend, like the long weekend immediately after this update. So it's possible that I won't actually upgrade to Windows 10 until I get back later in August.
That's what remoting login is for. You can just
It's
update that way.
true, but I feel like in Hawaii on a honeymoon, like I'm just sitting there on my phone, logging into TeamViewer to update my computer. I have a feeling that will not go over well.
Just send Julia to the spa, and then you'll have an hour and a half to
I guess
do your
so.
update. There you go.
That is an idea. I'm not sure
Yeah.
it's the best idea, but I will definitely keep it in mind.
Yeah.
All right, Mike. That's it for our regular show. I'm gonna say, I guess I'll just say bye for now. If you just want to stick, this is actually probably the shortest we've ever kept the main show, at least in a couple months. Um, so thank you for listening to this week's Future Chat. I'd like to thank once again unwindmedia.com/future chat for supporting the show. Please do go and subscribe. It helps us out if you subscribe via iTunes. If you'd like to rate or review the show, it would really help us out with rankings and getting new listeners. If you tell your friends about the show, it's another great way to help us out and keep this going. And I'll let you know that we'll be back right here next week on Sunday, our usual Sunday, with more science and tech talk. You can find past episodes of the show and plenty more, as I mentioned, at unwindmedia.com/future chat. See you next time.
See ya.
Okay, on to the little guys. So this story about batteries, is this directly related to the one we did a few weeks ago? Is it just more details on it, or is this a different project?
I forget what we talked about a couple weeks ago.
We talked about Alberta using.
No,
Was it
that was a new power plant, a new
It
gas
was
power plant.
natural gas,
Yeah,
right?
that was natural
Okay,
gas
so
to
this
replace
is
coal.
this is not the same thing.
No, so this is energy storage, not energy generation.
Okay.
And so TransAlta is a private company, seeing as Alberta Energy is deregulated, for better or for worse. Um,
You don't seem to have an opinion.
I wasn't around, like I was around, but I wasn't old enough to have an opinion on the deregulation. It's just, as far as I've known, it's always been deregulated, but my parents and our parents' generation have strong feelings about deregulation. So
Right.
from what I've read, it caused higher power bills. But anyway, this company that is doing power generation and transmission and that kind of thing, they're jumping on the Tesla battery bandwagon and trialing some energy storage at some commercial sites, such as a hospital or a grocery store, a university, that kind of thing. So these are those Powerwall batteries that we talked about extensively the past couple months. So the headline of the article mentions a large-scale energy storage project.
Okay.
To me, one battery or even a couple batteries in one building isn't large-scale. To me, large-scale is like grid storage, like when you're supporting a grid with batteries, energy storage. So I think maybe people are just getting excited because it's a Tesla battery and it's new, but having like a backup battery for a building isn't really new,
Right.
from my understanding. But either way, they're getting into the headlines because it's Tesla and they're buying Powerwalls, I guess. So I guess it's good to see them leading the way and hopefully encouraging others to look at energy storage as a something that might be worthwhile, as a backup. Or in this case, I think in this case is to help capitalize on the lower energy rates that you get during off-peak hours versus on-peak, to kind of take the load off. So in that sense, and that's why it's a commercial application, because those are the ones that are on the rated, the variable on-peak, off-peak peak rates.
Right.
From my understanding, houses, at least on NMAX, who most residences are, they don't have that option of the on peak off peak.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, so this is good to see companies kind of doing this, and I'm still wait for solar to get cheaper and more practical. 'Cause
Yeah.
I have a nice south-facing roof that could use some solar panels.
I forget where I was reading. I think it was Vox.com. They were talking about that there's actually quite a bit more solar power in the U.S. than most people tend to think. Luckily, I am fast at Googling and know my keywords. Uh, a new study, there were 9.2 gigawatts of customer-side solar capacity is left out of official statistics, and that's about 45% of the actual total power generated from solar. So it's about 50, it's saying 45 to 50% higher solar production than estimated in the U.S. Which is, yeah. Apparently, the new numbers, the new study says that 3 states, California, Arizona, and Hawaii, get more than 5% of their total electricity from solar. So that is more than I thought, like a lot more than I thought it was.
Yeah. Yeah, and the states, it helps that they have their sun belt that gets quite a bit of sun throughout the year and very little cloud. Canada is not as fortunate with that. Apparently, Calgary is actually the sunniest. I want to say the sunniest city in Canada as far as like total hours of sunlight throughout the year.
Huh.
I know I read that somewhere.
That doesn't sound right, but I'd like to think that it is. Like it's not a dark place.
Well, see, because we have the extended hours in the summer, right? Whereas you guys, you get dark like super early.
No. We get dark at like 9. I mean,
we get dark at like 10:30.
But it's not early. It's just not as late.
Right. Fair.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah. Anyway, Tesla batteries good for energy storage and trying to take advantage of the difference in rates. But I'm holding out for the grid energy storage as well as the solar supporting energy storage. So anyway,
what do you think the odds are of your company adopting this Tesla battery storage?
Well, it's more that if they offer it to their customers, I don't even know if this is TransAlta putting it on their own accord. If they're saying, hey, you guys can use it, but like for me, there'd be no benefit to using the Tesla battery except for just a backup energy source, because we're not on the floating rate type thing.
Okay.
Whereas like the off peak on peak, like I know you guys have it, and like I'd have to look into it some more, but as far as I know, that really isn't an option for us at this point.
Okay.
But
fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are definitely fully on it.
Yeah.
Although everyone says like, oh, it's terrible and it's so much more expensive. I'm only going to do laundry after 5 or after 7 p.m. But it's not that big of a price difference.
No.
Really not.
Not enough to go out of your way to not do laundry.
Like it's not enough to change your schedule. No. Like if you're sitting there waiting to do laundry, you should just do laundry. It's like 5 to 10 cents. Yeah. Your time is worth so much more than that. It's like the people that drive at like 20 kilometers to a gas station to fill up for 5 cents less.
And sit idling for half an hour waiting in line.
Exactly.
I've done the math before, and I'm like, I can save 4 cents. I'm only going to fill up 30 liters. So I'm saving $1.20 by spending an hour out of my day to do it. My time is worth more than $1.20 an hour.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty much. Plus the gas you actually spend going out of your way. But
yeah.
Anyway.
There's, as usual, I'm going to put a link to a relevant XKCD. It's number 951 for the people listening at home, where Randall does the math of gas stations. If you spend, the tagline is, if you spend 9 minutes of your time to save $1, you're working for less than minimum wage. And that's often what these kind of people end up doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's very interesting. I like the thought of companies and and homes having the opportunity to get onto what I'm going to call the smart grid. I'm going to call any sort of large scale battery installation part of the smart grid, because it's going to require sort of intelligence in how it distributes electricity and how it uses it.
Hmm.
But I'm looking forward to the future where that's just the normal thing.
Yeah.
So this next story I have here is just something I came across on Popular Science, and it was something that as sort of as a North American person, we don't really have to deal with HIV or AIDS on a regular basis. It doesn't really come up in the news, but obviously there are a lot of people suffering from those diseases, those viruses, in the sort of developing world. And so this story came across my RSS feeds that Cuban babies are now HIV free. And I've heard people, like sort of individuals on a sort of trial basis, going through test drug regimens to try to cure HIV using things like antiretrovirals or different antivirals. But I did not know that one treatment for, at least for mothers that have HIV, is if they take antiretroviral drugs while they're pregnant, they're actually able to give birth to non-HIV infected children, whereas otherwise they would just pass it on, and then the child would have it, and it has a very bad chance of surviving past childhood. But so in Cuba, this is what they do with every mother, is they give them this antiretroviral treatment, and they're the only country that is currently doing this. But and so as of 2013, this initiative made it so that only 2 babies in Cuba were born with HIV, which that sounds like it's still not a lot, but compared to every other country, including places like the States, it is like infinitesimal. So much so that the World Health Organization actually declared Cuba, that mother to child transmission of HIV in Cuba has been effectively eliminated. Like this is the kind of thing that if you can keep that up, you can rid your country's citizens of the disease within a generation if no
Yeah.
children have it.
Yeah. Well, it's as good as a cure.
Exactly. It
yeah.
effectively does just get rid of the disease. It's almost as effective as a vaccine, in that you're not like the generation of kids that are born don't have this disease. They're not forced to deal with it. Similar to like how smallpox and polio were eradicated in North America, and smallpox the world. But so I just thought this was a really awesome story. The stat they have here is, and this is again something that is totally unfamiliar to me, but every year 1.4 million HIV positive women become pregnant, and they have anywhere from a 15 to 45% chance of passing on the disease to their child. And so I have to assume that obviously there's not going to be a million women in Cuba that have HIV, that have kids, but to get a number as low as 2 in any sort of medical affliction, it's not insubstantial. Like that means that this works, and that every other country should be doing this already. And if you've seen the movie Sicko by Michael Moore, the documentary, you'll know that Cuba has a really good universal healthcare system. So it's not really surprising that they're a country that takes an initiative like this to try to eradicate HIV in their children.
Yeah. When I first read the story, the first thing that came to mind are the people that are very anti things.
What does that mean?
Like, oh, I don't want, toxins in my body. Oh, I want, like a natural pregnancy without painkillers, without this, without that. Like, even though a lot of those things are beneficial and do a lot of good, it's more of a principle thing versus, yeah, it makes sense to do that. So I can imagine that's why it hasn't and won't catch on in, at least North America, just because that'd be very against what pregnancy and childbirth has become.
Yeah.
Like it's become a very marketed individual thing. It's like, well, you have your own birth plan, you do it the way you want, you take painkillers, you don't take painkillers, like it's very like it's made a thing. So
Right.
it's not like, okay, let's get this child out of you healthy. It's like, well, you can have it your way kind of thing. And this kind of goes against that.
Right. I mean,
If it
yeah,
became like a mandatory thing. If it became an option, great, but you're not going to see widespread adoption.
right. I mean, this is in the coming in this news. This study is coming in the same week as the news that California passed this law that makes it illegal to morally uh, refuse to get your children vaccinated. The same week that Jim Carrey came out as an anti-vaxxer again, just sort of reiterating that he still feels that this kind of stuff is being forced on people and that it's unhealthy when study after study shows that we're actually preventing diseases by doing this. And then I heard this week that in something like 13 years, we had for the first time in 13 years, we had the states had a death from measles. And it's like we've cured this. There's a vaccine for it. We can. This
If
child
only there
died.
was a vaccine.
This child died completely unnecessarily, and that's terrible, and that's really
Yeah.
sad. But at the same time, you can't help but think, what are these parents thinking? That I get that they're trying to do what's best for their children, but at a certain point, what's best for your children has to be what a doctor tells you is best for your children.
Hmm.
Like, you have to trust the healthcare system is not making money off of vaccines. So the argument that it's like big pharma is trying to sell you these vaccines, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. I've said it before that I don't blame these parents for being scared of vaccines and believing what they believe, because the stuff out there telling them this is very convincing if that's all you're exposed to
Yeah.
and you don't do your own research and kind of see a bit more of a balanced and knowledged take on it. So I wouldn't go so far as to blame the parents, but it's more just blaming media
The
for
media,
allowing
yeah.
that kind of thing to propagate.
Media and the sense of community, in that I'm going to call out Fox News specifically, not necessarily for this exact issue, but in general, just sort of fear mongering, going with things that are anti-scientific just to be sort of, oh, we're anti-establishment and we're the little guy and the liberal media is out to get you, when really they're literally just spreading misinformation about that kind of thing and actually hurting people by doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But this news out of Cuba is great, and hopefully it's the kind of thing that the rest of the world, the developed world and developing world, will be able to use to their advantage to hopefully, if not completely eradicate HIV, at least get it so that within I don't want to jump to think that we can just get rid of it, because it's a huge problem. It might take a few generations, if of sustained effort by the entire world, to actually get rid of it, because it's a sexually transmitted disease and humans have this thing where we really, really, really like sex. It's a hard thing to do. Something like smallpox is it's a very visible disease. So if you have smallpox, there's you're not going to go near that person. Whereas if someone has HIV, there's shame associated with it. There's an inability or desire to not come forward. So being able to do this through drugs and through a couple of generations of babies not inheriting their parents' condition, hopefully we can really take a hit out of HIV. Okay. Up next, a very much lighter story about Google Glass. What did we find out about
Yes.
Google Glass this week?
The Google Glass we haven't heard about in
Yeah,
quite a while.
in
I
a
think
long while.
the last one we heard was that it was dead.
Yeah.
That they were taking the Explorer Edition away and kind of rethinking it. Then we heard that it was still alive and people were still developing it, and now there's rumor, and I think this is still a rumor,
Yeah.
um, that they're developing Google Glass as a enterprise edition. Now, in our discussion of applications of Google Glass, I think we did talk about the applications in the workplace, such as on construction sites or just places where you'd need to be a bit more hands-free and kind of be more uh, non-gimmicky, I guess, in its application. So as opposed to just kind of looking at a text message, you're actually interacting with like a video screen in the corner of your eye, or trying to follow instructions or that kind of thing.
Right.
So I think their idea is that the workplace is where the future is for Google Glass, versus a virtual reality or augmented reality type system where it'd be more for entertainment or just more commonplace.
Yeah.
So yeah, it looks like there's hints of there being an enterprise edition, and that you'll start seeing some testing happening again, I guess. But you're not going to see it as hyped and marketed the same way that your original Google Glass was.
Right.
Imagine. But
I
I don't know.
imagine it will still appeal to some consumers, but
Oh,
it's
for
not going to
sure.
be
Yeah.
targeted specifically to them.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is Google Glass Enterprise Edition is kind of what they're anticipating it being called. Um, So and yeah, they're saying that it's not really like a completely revamped version, but it's just different hardware with kind of different integrations, such as Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, like faster Wi-Fi and Bluetooth type integrations that might kind of go with whatever devices you might be using in the workplace that can kind of go along with it. So I don't know. Do you see a future for Google Glass either in your own or a consumer's life or in the workplace?
I have always really liked it as a product. I haven't tried it. I haven't worn it, but I've always loved the idea of that kind of wearable thing where you have an overlay. And I am more excited about the idea of HoloLens
Hmm.
just because it's sort of more immersive experience. But I love the idea of having digital information overlaid on your vision. And so I can definitely, I don't know if I see myself using it in my current job, but I can certainly see a lot of jobs that would benefit from having that kind of information overlaid on your actual vision. Like, I guess it's kind of augmented reality, but not in the normal way that I think about it, where it's sort of like Google Glass itself isn't going to place things with depth of field. They're just going to be overlaid on a screen. But it is obviously very interesting to have that kind of thing possible. And for me to say that I'm excited to have it, I would have to try it first. Like it's the kind of sort of paradigm shifting thing that you wouldn't just go and buy for the heck of it. You'd want to try and know that it's actually something that's going to work for you before spending. I mean, the fact that it's an enterprise edition kind of makes me think that maybe that's just because they weren't able to get it down to $200 or $300. And so in the enterprise, you can actually make a product like this that's successful at
Yeah.
$1,500 a pop, like the Explorer edition was.
Yeah.
So maybe that's just all it is. They can't miniaturize this for any less than $1,500 or $1,000 maybe, but it's something that people aren't going to buy uh, just for themselves. They're going to buy them as part of a business
Yeah.
or part of like a hospital if it's a doctor using it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think with the advent of like HoloLens and your Oculus virtual reality systems and HoloLens being your augmented, that's kind of where the market's going, I think, as far as wearable immersive technology. Whereas Google Glass, I always saw it as an application to have easy access to a camera type
Right.
thing, with it just being on there, and you can kind of just quickly say, I don't know how you trigger a picture being taken, but there's times where I wish that I could just look at something and a picture be taken versus having to pull up my phone, go to the camera app, and get it
Right.
going and wait for the shutter kind of thing, right? That's kind of for me the only application where a Google Glass type device would be useful, or like a live streaming where you want a first person view of something kind of
Yeah.
thing. Um, but GoPro now has their own camera system, and I think they're streaming now for GoPros that you can integrate with a device like a, I don't know.
A
I because
smartphone,
what's
for
that?
instance, like a smartphone.
Yeah, like yeah. So it would transmit the video that you're seeing through the
Yeah.
GoPro to a feed, and you can watch that. So that's the kind of way that the live streaming thing is going. So in this case, I think as far as the glass application goes with work, they show that picture of the construction worker wearing the Google Glass, and it's because it's convenient. He might have gloves on. He might be working on some sort of machinery, and it just pops up on there. You integrate with it or interact with it, and it goes away, kind of thing, all
Right.
very seamlessly. So that's kind of a more natural application for it than just your everyday consumer, I think.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, for sure.
it'll be interesting to see where this goes and what their strategy is to market it. And if you are correct, and I didn't think about that before, but that's a good point too, is that the price point might just stay at that $1,000 mark, but it makes sense for a company to invest in it if it works for what they're looking for.
Right. Yeah. I just I just saw a link in Twitter to NASA just added some new images to of Pluto. Just as a point of real time follow up, I'm going to put a link to it's nasa.gov/feature/latest-images-of-Pluto-from-new-horizons.
Right.
Latest images of Pluto from New Horizons. Um, they're getting super close, and they've colorized the picture to what we know it is colored, but it's getting pretty clear, and they're apparently as of July 3rd, because the images are delayed right now. It's like less than 8 million miles away,
Hmm.
so it's getting real close.
Compared to how far away Pluto is.
Yeah. So we'll do one last one here. What do you say? This is something that I saw pop up, and I was skeptical of it, and I just want to talk about it briefly because it's so weird that the source of this story is time.com.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is Time magazine. So
Right.
two scientists who have been studying the data from the Philae lander on the comet came out and made this huge proclamation that there could be life on Philae, on the comet. There could be. They found organic matter. They found a number of things that supposedly compelled them to think that there could be microbes, like living things, on this actual comet. And right away, I look at that, and so they say organic rich black crust. They're saying that there could be extremophiles, which are microbes that are able to survive under extreme conditions under the surface, so trapped in the ice. Immediately, I think about this, like, we send a probe to land on one comet, and that comet finds life. Like, that's just not that's not going to happen. If we found life on the first comet we ever land on, that's not it's not that means that life is everywhere in the universe. Like,
Right.
anywhere we go, there's going to be life if we find it on this one dead icy rock. And so almost immediately I saw this, I put it in the notes for the show because I was like, this is weird. We normally come to this kind of story with, like, the person who found it, it's like, hey, this is really interesting. The other two hosts are like, no, this is not a thing. But fortunately, some other scientists, Phil Plait included, immediately were like, this is not good science. Apparently, the two scientists that made these suggestions have done this before. Like, they'll put out these random crazy claims that there's no reason to believe that it's a thing. Like, if there ends up being microbes, it's not going to be for the reasons that they described.
Right. They're just speculating.
Yeah,
Very extremely.
completely speculating.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the other scientists that are basically saying no to this research, not to the research, to the speculation, are basically like, there are so many other ways to create this kind of matter without needing microbes.
Yeah.
And
So is this
that
like an Occam's razor type
yeah,
situation? Yeah.
this kind of thing, like a comet is not where you're going to find life. It's something that's been traipsing around the solar system and the galaxy for probably millions of years without interacting with anything. It's really unlikely, even frozen in ice, that you're going to find it life. Just the way they're formed, the way they travel around, it's not. These things do flybys around the sun in general. Like if it's an active comet like P67, it's been around the sun before. It has been exposed to the very hot temperatures of the sun. A lot of the outer layers melted off. Like it's just
Well,
not.
radiation, like
Well, yeah, radiation.
not
Not,
just heat, but
yeah, everything.
yeah.
So yeah, probably almost certainly not life on the comet, but interesting story for a couple hours to think
Yeah.
about, not real science.
Yeah. And I'd like to lay blame on Time magazine for lack of due diligence, possibly, because ideally magazines have some sort of fact checking, but you also want to get the headline out. And when you
So
say scientists suggest, then that
yeah,
kind of oh, they said it. These two guys who call themselves scientists, they said this thing. So
yeah. So here's the thing. Um, if you go to time.com right now, and don't do this because they don't need the clicks, uh, and you go under latest, the top story, the Philae comet could be home to microbial alien life, scientists say. If you go down to the fifth story, it's almost the same photo. Scientists shoot down claim that alien life may be on comet. Why is that low? Like it's much lower.
yeah,
The stories came out a couple hours apart. They can remove that story or like fold that story into the other one, but
yeah,
having the two on at the same, like one is basically
yeah.
saying maybe life, the other one's saying that story was stupid, but the one that says maybe life is higher up.
Yeah. I've seen that criticized before. I can't remember what it was about, but it was another guy who wrote some sort of story on that kind of thing, or just some sort of claim, and then everyone disproved it, or later details later showed it to be false or something. So
Right.
then just down at the bottom in like small text is like, oh, update, this is all wrong, or something like that. But all the original story is still there, and you don't see the update till the very end. The
Right.
title's still the same, everything's changed except for the very bottom where it says, oh, disclaimer update, this has been shown to be untrue or something like that.
Right.
And it's like, or it'll be like one key fact and key claim made in the original was shown to be false, but nothing's changed in the original. It's just at the bottom it says, oh, note, so and so actually didn't do this kind of thing. And
Right.
it's like, but it's still there saying he did. So it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's just poor journalistic integrity.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the same thing that happened with Andrew Wakefield with the vaccines cause autism thing. He published the results, and that got disseminated widely. Everyone freaked out about it, and then it was retracted. He was completely discredited, lost his job, lost all credibility. But his research is still the papers that they shake when they say vaccines cause autism. And
Yeah,
like you may as well put a giant discredited stamp on the front of that paper, but it's still the go-to source for all of these people making these claims.
yeah. Well, and that's, we've talked about it before. That's a fairly widespread problem in science, is that
Yeah.
you can discredit or you can redact papers, but once they're in circulation, then it's hard to get them out.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess that's it for this week. It was a little bit shorter. Hopefully I mean, that's fine with me. I think an hour and a half starts to stretch on a little long for listeners. Hopefully they'll appreciate the hour and 15-minute or so length. But Mike, it's a pleasure talking to you as always.
Always a pleasure for me as well.
And if you are listening right now but are not subscribed to our show, do head to unwindmedia.com/futurechat and find links to subscribe there. Thanks for listening.
See ya.
See ya.